They told me I wasn't good enough for his world, that my background embarrassed his family. So he left me for someone who fit their perfect image. But when I walked back into his gala years later, successful, powerful, and standing beside the most influential man in the city, his face went pale. This isn't just a story about betrayal. It's about how the woman he tried to erase became the one everyone came to see. That was the truth Jasmine kept folded like a letter in her chest, a reminder for the nights when silence felt heavier than sleep. But before the spotlight, there was the dim hallway outside a courthouse where her marriage ended like a meeting that ran long. Baltimore had been kind to their beginnings. Back then, Jasmine and Marcus were just two broke kids who believed in impossible things. She covered rent with double shifts while he studied case law, slipped notes under his coffee mug that said "You're enough," and learned to stretch a week's groceries into dinners for two. When the first job came, associate track at a DC firm, she clapped loudest, eyeing the only good suit he owned, and promised the rest would come. The rest did come: better suits, better dinners, better invitations. And with it, Brianna. She arrived like a climate, cool air, no weather. She didn't speak to Jasmine so much as over her shoulder. Marcus was raised to move in certain circles, Brianna would say, turning a wineglass by the stem. Presentation matters. Especially now. It started as advice, softened by smile. It grew teeth. Tone down the stories about your family, she whispered once, as if kindness were a secret. People don't understand those neighborhoods. They assume things. Marcus picked up the tune. He asked Jasmine to polish little pieces of herself, her laugh, her dress, the way she said Baltimore like home. At first Jasmine cut the tags off dresses she couldn't afford and told herself it was compromise. When compromise became erasure, she looked for him in the mirror and couldn't find either of them. The night he left was quiet. He sat at their kitchen table like it was a deposition. His tie was still straight, he never loosened it at home anymore. "Jasmine, I can't keep explaining you," he said, as if she were a misplaced receipt. "My colleagues, their wives, this is a different world. I need someone who elevates me." Her mouth opened and closed around 1,000 nights, the ramen years, the pressed shirts, the rent, the loving him when he hated himself. "Elevates," she repeated, tasting the insult. "I built the ground you're standing on." He didn't argue. He slid the papers across the table. In the signature line she saw the shape of her life change. Brianna didn't smile at the courthouse. Triumph never needed teeth. She placed a hand on her son's arm, a benediction for winning a game she'd invented. Jasmine walked into the afternoon with a box of documents and a set of keys that unlocked a smaller life. They all assumed smaller meant lesser. They were wrong. The spotlight wasn't a room you were invited into. It was a switch you could build with your own hands. The pen left the page, but the story didn't. Jasmine stepped into the quiet like it was training, learning how to hear herself again. The townhouse in Silver Spring had thin walls and honest light. Morning poured through the blinds and showed the dust, the boxes, the tiredness under Jasmine's eyes. She let it. She needed to see what was real. At first she tried to outrun the ache with newness, heels that blistered, book clubs she didn't like, pronunciation drills that rounded off the edges of words that came from her grandmother's porch. None of it felt like hers. You can't impersonate belonging. The mask always slips. What did feel like hers were the corner stores, the barber on the block who knew a city better than any survey, the church that sorted canned goods every second Saturday. When she walked those aisles, the owners didn't ask where she went to school. They asked what time she could meet. Problems were specific. Solutions were measurable. Jasmine felt necessary. She started with one bodega that was losing foot traffic to a chain pharmacy across the street. She changed shelf heights, rearranged impulse items, created a chalkboard where regulars could post flyers for baby showers and lost cats. Sales ticked up. The owner told 2 friends. Those told 2 more. She didn't design the neighborhood. She listened to it. What Jasmine did had a name, consulting, but the way she did it didn't look like the glossy decks Marcus's firm produced. She brought a clipboard, a stopwatch, and hands that could haul crates if the afternoon got tight. She taught cashiers how to upsell without sounding like scripts. She taught owners how to track what moved, not what they wished would. She filed an LLC because invoices needed letterhead. She called it Lantern Works because light was the point. The first month, she broke even. The second, she didn't. The third, she hired help, contractors at first, then 2 part-timers who knew both spreadsheets and Spanish well enough to translate urgency into action. Jasmine built her days like scaffolding. mornings for field visits, afternoons for planning, nights for reading contracts she used to skip. She learned permits and signage ordinances and how to argue with a city clerk without making an enemy. She studied seasonal buying and neighborhood psychology. She found a lawyer who charged fairly and a printer who never missed a deadline. Word of mouth did what billboards couldn't. A regional bank called about redesigning branches to feel less like vaults and more like rooms where people didn't whisper. A nonprofit asked if she could fix their intake flow because clients felt talked down to. She didn't promise transformation. She promised to watch the door, count the minutes, redraw the map. Bills got paid. Then they got paid with ease. She returned the heels. She kept the linen jacket that didn't apologize for her shoulders. On Sundays she cooked. On Mondays she negotiated retainers that made sense. Afterward, the head of that group, gray at the temples, amused by nothing and no one, shook her hand like she'd moved a chess piece he hadn't seen. "You think like an owner," he said. She drove home without music, windows down, air on her face. Owner. The word didn't scare her. It lit the room. The first call back into Marcus's world didn't come from him. It came from a guest list. The envelope was cream stock with a serif font that cost extra. Inside, a card, the Riverton Civic Gala, cocktails at 7, dinner at 8, a slideshow of people congratulating themselves at 9. One of Lanternworks' new bank clients sponsored a table and wanted Jasmine in the photo. She almost laughed. She said yes. She chose a dress that didn't fight her, black with clean lines, pockets deep enough for a phone and a square of courage. She wore her hair as it grew, not as anyone told her to tame it. When she walked into the ballroom, she didn't look for Marcus. The room found them anyway. Brianna spotted her first. The older woman's smile chilled a degree, then returned to room temperature. Marcus turned, and the surprise on his face flickered into something rehearsed, a thin line he'd used on judges and donors. "Jasmine," he said, taking too long to finish the word. "I didn't realize you were invited." Jasmine finished, pleasant. "You'd be surprised where I belong." Brianna touched his sleeve. "How lovely to see you, dear. We're so proud of how far Marcus has come, aren't we?" The sentence did two things at once and neither was subtle. Jasmine let it fall to the carpet. "Enjoy the evening," she said. She moved on because you don't argue with furniture. At the bar, a junior partner from Marcus's firm made small talk with the false ease of someone measuring a stranger's worth. "So, what do you do?" he asked, scanning her for tells. "I help places work for the people who use them," she said. "It pays the bills." He smirked. "Ah. Consulting." "Ownership," she corrected softly. She didn't explain further. He wasn't the audience. During dinner, a slideshow rolled, ribbon cuttings, handshakes, families posed in front of houses they'd mortgaged their futures to love. The bank's name glowed on a step-and repeat. Jasmine's tablemates asked questions that weren't condescending so much as curious in the way people are when they learn a street has two names depending on which end you live. She answered without performing. She was on her way back from a phone call when she heard them, Marcus and a colleague, talking in the hallway by the coatroom. His voice held the smooth condescension she used to mistake for confidence. "She's fine," he said, as if appraising furniture. "But let's be honest, Jasmine was never built for this level. I carried us for years. That's what people forget." Jasmine didn't step out. She didn't defend a history she knew by heart. She pressed her palm once against the cool wood of the door, felt the old hurt ask for a seat at the table, and denied it. Then she walked back into the ballroom and took her chair as if it had been made for her back. On the ride home she let the sting burn off. By morning it had turned into something cleaner, fuel. She wrote for 2 hours at the kitchen table, mapping things that didn't yet exist. At 9, she drove to a meeting that would change the kind of rooms she entered. The city's largest redevelopment proposal in a generation had stalled, the Riverpoint district, a mess of warehouses and waterline and stories people told about what used to be there. Investors had money. The plan had renderings. No one had the trust of the neighborhoods that bordered it. Jasmine did not promise trust. She promised to earn it. Thomas sat at the far end of the conference table, listening without the performative nods Jasmine had learned to distrust. He waited for silence before he spoke. "Your plan measures dignity," he said. "Investors don't like to fund what they can't chart. You charted it." He wasn't handsome in the magazine way, he was arresting in the way a person looks when you know they are paying attention. He asked precise questions. He didn't repeat Brianna's favorite word, Polish. He used Jasmine's favorite one, enough, and aimed it at her work, not her wardrobe. They met again. Then again. The meetings became walks. The walks became hours that didn't drag. He didn't offer rescue. He offered partnership with terms she could read and amend. "Let's build Riverpoint like the city will still exist in 50 years, Thomas said. "Let's not make it pretty. Let's make it honest." They formed a joint venture that didn't feel like compromise. Lantern Works would lead community systems. Thomas's fund would anchor the capital stack. The city would get something better than a press release. The deal sheets didn't mention Marcus. They didn't need to. The gala that changed everything wasn't the first Jasmine attended. It was the first where she owned the microphone and the decision behind it. The Riverton Civic Gala returned a year later. Same chandeliers, same waiters who remembered faces better than names. This time Jasmine's name wasn't on a guest list, it was on the program, next to the words keynote and project chair, Riverpoint. Her stomach didn't do the old tricks. It sat quietly where it belonged. She walked in with Thomas, not on his arm like a trophy but beside him like a co-signer on the future. Heads turned for the spectacle of it. Whispers rose because whispers feed themselves. Across the room, Marcus saw her. The recognition hit first, then the math. Brianna followed his gaze and missed a step in shoes that didn't usually miss. A junior partner murmured something about "isn't that?" And no one finished the sentence. The chair of the bank's foundation introduced Jasmine with a bio that emphasized work, not survival. "She designed listening into the model," he said. The numbers followed. Jasmine took the podium. Light found her face like it had been waiting. She didn't clear her throat. She didn't apologize for taking up space. "Cities don't fail because people stop caring," she began. "They fail when the people who care aren't in the room when decisions are made. Tonight, we're changing who sits at the table, and who the table is built for." She ended simply. "Riverpoint won't be a monument to our names," she said. "It'll be evidence that we remembered who cities are for." Applause came in a wave that didn't feel performative. Jasmine stepped back, nodded to the AV tech because people forget to, and found Thomas near the wings. He squeezed her hand once, a code that said you did the thing you said you'd do. Then came the second part of the evening, a special announcement the organizers had teased for days. Jasmine didn't know the details. She'd asked not to. The board chair claimed the microphone and warmed the room with the kind of preamble donor culture loves. "We are thrilled to announce the legal advisory partner for Riverpoint, after a competitive process, of course." Polite laughter. A logo flashed on the screen. Jasmine recognized it the way you recognize a song you used to dance to and now can't bear. West & Cole LLP. Marcus's firm. A murmur rolled. Marcus smoothed his tie. Brianna's chin lifted by habit. Jasmine felt the sting of old rooms and let it pass like a summer headache. She didn't run the selection. She ran the project. They were not the same thing. The chair continued. "And, by unanimous vote, the board has appointed a community oversight committee with binding authority on public-facing decisions. The committee will be chaired by Ms. Jasmine Carter." Silence, then a sharper kind of applause, the kind that says oh. Binding authority wasn't a ribbon. It was a lever. The slide changed again, and Jasmine learned the twist alongside everyone else. Riverpoint would adopt a vendor code requiring local hiring floors, transparent billing, and a conflict of interest disclosure that brought a few lawyers' hands to their phones. The code aligned with best practices she'd written months ago and assumed would be watered down. It hadn't been. It had grown teeth. Jasmine looked for Thomas. He gave a barely there nod. He'd advocated hard behind closed doors, but he hadn't told her because the pleasure wasn't in the surprise. It was in the inevitability of good sense finally passing. Marcus's face went a shade lighter. Binding authority meant the committee, her committee, could review contracts that touched the public. It didn't fire his firm. It made them accountable to standards that Brianna would call fussy and economists would call fair. After the announcement, the mingling began. The awkward ballet of donors, developers, activists, and the occasional reporter looking for a quote that would get clicks. Jasmine made small talk without giving herself away. When she turned to fresh air, Marcus was waiting in the service corridor where the light hummed and the floor was scuffed by carts. "Congratulations," he said, voice too casual for his eyes. "Quite a speech. And a chairmanship. You must be proud." "I am," Jasmine said. "You must be busy. New advisory work." He wet his lips. "We'll make it work. Look, about the vendor code, there's some flexibility, right? For firms like ours that have always had flexibility," she said lightly. You'll be fine if you're transparent. He stepped closer. Jasmine, come on. We both know you don't want to make this adversarial. We both know I don't have to, she said. The standards aren't adversarial. They're adult. He tried a different door. You look incredible, he said, as if nostalgia could file a motion. I didn't expect to see me here, she finished. I know. He searched her face for the old map. It wasn't there. Behind him, Brianna appeared, perfume arriving first. Jasmine, she said, using the tone she saved for waiters and women who declined to disappear. We're all on the same team, aren't we? The city, the firms, the donors. Surely we can avoid unnecessary obstacles. Obstacles like accountability? Jasmine asked. She didn't raise her voice. The word accountability did the work for her. Good night, Brianna. She walked back toward the ballroom, passing a bussier who had been listening without meaning to. The woman gave Jasmine a small smile, the kind you give a person who just said the thing you wish you could say at your own job. Jasmine nodded back. Not every spotlight involves a stage. The city would write headlines about the announcement. Jasmine would write the memo that turned ethics into logistics by Tuesday. Monday brought meetings, Tuesday brought memos, Wednesday brought heat. West and Cole's project team sent over a draft compliance plan that looked like a brochure. Jasmine returned it with notes that looked like work. Marcus asked to meet in person. She offered 9 a.m. Friday in a conference room with glass walls and a receptionist who didn't whisper. He arrived with a junior associate who took notes like transcription. Jasmine, he began, smoothing. We're aligned on outcomes. Some of these benchmarks, frankly, they're new, she supplied. Hard? That's what innovation feels like at first. He tried charm. He tried the past. He tried implying that Brianna still knew people who could murmur in the right ears. Jasmine never said no out loud. She said show me, and the documents did the rest. When the meeting ended, he lingered at the door. Do you ever think about, he started, then shook his head. Never mind. I think about bus stops, she said, smiling. And deadlines. And getting this right. He nodded, self-conscious, like a man surprised to find the camera isn't on him. Then, almost soft, you were always better at people than I was. She didn't rescue him from the admission. Good luck with the revisions, she said. I know you can meet the bar. It's not higher than it should have always been. Word of the new standards traveled. A subcontractor who'd underpaid workers on a previous job withdrew from consideration without being asked. A local print shop won a contract over a national chain because their bid included a training line item that hadn't been in the RFP and should have been. Jasmine amended the RFP so the next bidder would have to include it, too. That's what fairness looks like when you don't confuse it with mercy. Brianna approached her once more, this time at a small luncheon where name tags did half the work. You've become very influential, she said, as if the word were a diagnosis. I've become responsible, Jasmine replied. It shows up the same way. Brianna's smile hardened. Just remember whose world this is. Jasmine sipped water. The one with bus stops and corner stores? It's theirs. I work for them. Revenge didn't arrive with a gavel. It accumulated, in the email chains where Marcus wrote thank you for the clarification, in the neighborhood walkthrough where a teen asked if the new skate spot would actually be lit at night and the answer was yes because safety is a design choice, in the ribbon cutting where Jasmine stepped back so a retiree could speak first. People noticed, not that she was gracious, but that she was specific. Late one evening, she passed the old kitchen table she'd kept out of stubbornness and found her hand smoothing the scar where a hot pan had landed years ago. The scar didn't vanish with time. It became proof. Some marks you don't buff out. You frame them. The city would get its grand opening. Jasmine would get something better, a quiet moment where the past stopped asking for a seat at her table. Thomas found her cinching a zip tie on a banner that kept slipping. Project chair, keynote, head of logistics, he said, amused. Anything else? Bench counter, she said. I owe you an apology. For what? You were right about adding 2 more on the west side. He grinned. I accept. People gathered. The mayor said the things mayors say. The bank thanked the stakeholders that made donors feel included. A grandmother told a story about her first job on that very pier 50 years ago, the way the morning fog hung heavy until the sun made it thin enough to push with your hand. Jasmine clapped hardest for her. When it was Jasmine's turn, she didn't give the speech she'd written. She gave the one the day asked for. We built this with math and with memory, she began. The math proves the rent won't jump just because the sidewalk got prettier. The memory reminds us who gets to decide what pretty means. She thanked the janitors by name because she'd asked. She thanked the city clerk who'd stayed late to stamp permits. She thanked the bus drivers. She thanked the teenager whose question about lighting had led to a change order that no one wanted to pay for and everyone was now glad they did. She didn't mention Marcus. She didn't need to. He stood in the crowd, hands in pockets, not near the front. Brianna wasn't beside him. Rumor said she'd fallen out with a donor over a seating chart. The rumor didn't interest Jasmine anymore. Seating charts had never built a life. After the ribbon fell, the press asked for glossy quotes. Jasmine gave them honest ones. Accountability is cheaper than repairs, she said into a MIC, and dignity costs less than security when you seed it early. In the late afternoon, after the trucks had rolled and the trio packed up, Jasmine sat alone on one of the benches she'd argued for. Thomas came and didn't speak for a while because love sometimes knows that quiet is the compliment. You did it, he said eventually. No, she said, smiling. We did it. And so did the woman who asked for a bench because her knees hurt. And the kid who told us the skate park needed lights. And the barber who explained why the sign had to face west. I just listened and wrote it down. Thomas tilted his head. What do you want next? More rooms like this, she said. Where the people who live with the consequences make the decisions. Less pretending that Polish equals competence. She glanced at him. Dinner first. Then rooms. He laughed. They stood. Across the plaza, Marcus approached with careful steps. He looked tired in a way suits can't fix. Jasmine, he said. Congratulations. It's impressive. Thank you, she answered. The word was enough. He swallowed. We met all the committee's conditions. I know. We learned, he said, as though it cost him. I learned. She believed him, about the learning, not about its permanence. Either way, it wasn't her burden. Good, she said. Hold on to it. He nodded, eyes flicking to Thomas, then back. I was wrong. She didn't perform forgiveness for him. She didn't hold on to anger for herself. She offered what she'd worked so hard to have, clarity. You wanted a world where you didn't have to explain the parts of me that didn't fit your idea of status, she said. I built a world where I don't have to apologize for them. He exhaled, a sound like a surrender that arrives late and isn't required. Take care, Jasmine. You too, she said. He walked away without turning to check if she watched. She didn't. Jasmine took Thomas's hand. The spotlight wasn't a circle of light on her. It was all the little pools of light they'd laid down so other people could see where they were going. That was the point. That had always been the point. They walked home by the water. No cameras, no podiums, no applause that insists on being thanked. Just the work, and the love that made doing it feel less like burden and more like belonging. Hit subscribe now for more powerful Black stories of betrayal, revenge, and redemption. And never miss the next twist.